All right. Perf. All right. Howdy, folks. Let us begin. So, what class is this? I'm just kidding. All right. So this week, folks, we are going to be taking a look at the rubric. This rubric that we're going to be using for predominantly until the rest of the semester, until the end of the semester. So it's best that we familiarize and acquaint ourselves with it. It has a couple of quirks that I'm going to explain before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the rubric that I want people to really pay attention to because these are things that people always end up having questions about later on in the semester. So the first thing that I want to talk about is where you can find the rubric. You can find the rubric always in its original iteration in the supplemental information packet. The link for the supplemental information packet is in our syllabus. I don't remember whether or not I've uploaded a copy of this rubric into this week's Blackboard content or next week's Blackboard content. Either way, it doesn't matter. There's a breakdown of the rubric itself, a little 10-minute video that will always be available that is found in our Blackboard content folder for this week. Okay? So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, and so that's how to find it. So the preliminary thing that I want you to know about this rubric, and this is part of what we're going to talk about today. What we're going to talk about today is the rubric, the grade conversions for the rubric, and then the monologue activity that we have for next week. So the first thing that I want you to know about this rubric is that it was developed sometime in the 60s or 70s. They compiled a bunch of public speaking criteria, and they determined that these categories here called competencies and the criteria therein were the best means of grading people's speeches, of evaluating people's speeches. So that's where this rubric comes from. So the rubric that you will find in the supplemental information packet is a printable version that when I first got to UAF, I wanted to go green with my classroom. I wanted to go fully electronic so that we wouldn't be wasting paper. So I digitized that rubric, and little by little, semester by semester, I've been tweaking it into what you're looking at now. And even for this semester, I'm working on a newer version that you guys will be getting. The actual criteria and things like that aren't going to be any different. It's just a matter of making it a little bit more easy for me to grade. Now, the first thing that I want you to know is that, like I said last week, for speeches and presentations, if you show up, if you give me a video, even if that video simply contains your name and what your speech topic is going to be about, the minimum grade that I can give you for that speech is 60%. All right? If you don't hand that in, or if you just hand in, my name is Ramsey and I don't have a topic, you don't get any points for that. All right? You tell me your name, you tell me what your speech topic was going to be about. Even if you make it up while you're recording the video, I will give you that 60%. That's it. No questions asked. Okay? If you don't turn anything in, you just get a big fat 0. Okay? All right. Now, as I said, the rubric is broken down into 8 categories, which on this rubric are called competencies. Okay? But they're just categories. Each of these categories has a set of criteria associated with it. Okay? The first criteria, the first competency, are assignment specifics. At a general level, did you satisfy the requirements for the assignment? Did you prepare? Did you practice? Did you meet the time requirement? The time requirement for our informative speeches is 5 minutes, and you have a leeway of 1 minute on either side. So if you give me a 4-minute speech, or if you give me a 6-minute speech, you will be considered as having met the time requirement. However, if you give me a 3-minute, 59-second speech, if you give me a speech that is 6 minutes and 1 second, you will not have met the time requirement, and you will lose points for prep as well as practice, because as you'll find with a lot of this rubric, things tie into each other. Okay? All right. So, and then the last criteria there, met assignment specifics. That's not going to be super relevant to your class because there are no persuasive speeches in this class. But if I asked for an informative speech and you gave me a 20-minute lecture on, why coffee is the best hot beverage, obviously then you're not meeting the assignment requirements. You're not giving me informative. You're just giving me your opinion. Next is the introduction, and these next competencies 2, 3, and 4, those are going to be sort of about the meat and potatoes, the actual content of your speech. We're not going to delve too deeply into that until next week's lecture, but just to familiarize and acquaint you with the topic, we'll talk about it here for a little bit. First part, your introduction, and if you've ever written an essay for English class or anything like that, then you'll be really familiar with this, what's called the descriptive informative format. You start off with a hook, an attention getter that's meant to enrapture your audience and make them want to listen to your speech. Your thesis statement. So if you think about your speech topic as the general topic that you're going to be talking about. So let's say you want to talk about video games. Okay, that's your topic. All right. Your thesis would be a narrowing down, a focusing down of that topic. If you tell me video games, you might as well have not told me what your speech is going to be about, because that's such a broad topic that it's difficult to I'm not going to know what the speech is really going to be about. What part of video games are you going to be talking about? Okay. However, if your thesis statement is the way in which past video games have shaped modern video games, that's a very specific topic. I know exactly what you're going to be talking about, okay? Relevance to audience is the next criteria there. How is this? All speeches can be relevant to an audience. Here, what I want to know is why you think your audience should care about this topic. If your relevance to audience is because video games are awesome, well, that's not a great subject, right? Or that's not a great reason for your audience to care. What is it that compels you about video games? What is it that you find intriguing and interesting about video game history or about vintage video games that you want your audience to know about? Okay? Establishing relevance makes your audience care more about the thing that you're talking about. Preview of points. A lot of people get confused between the thesis statement and the preview of points. If you look at the topic as the most general thing, the thesis statement is a focusing down of that topic. Your preview of points is a breaking down of that thesis statement. So if your thesis statement is looking at how past video games have influenced modern video games, you'll break it down into your preview of points, for which in my class you need 3 points. 3 main points to talk about for your speeches. So you would say how space limitations have gotten programmers to become a lot more inventive, how an easy interface makes the game more enjoyable, and how learning from past mistakes regarding storytelling in video games has made modern storytelling in video games a lot more engaging. All right, those are 3 points, and those are three very specific points that reinforce this topic that you want, this thesis about this topic that you're talking about. So each of those main points reinforces this idea of how past video games have shaped present video games, and they all relate to this general topic of video games. So your topic, your thesis statement, your preview points. All right? And then transition into body. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the different kinds of transitions. Transitioning is a very simple concept. Transitioning, you're in Fairbanks, you want to get to Anchorage. What road are you going to take to get there? Okay? So just like you would have to drive down a specific road to get from your point A to point B, your transition is this road, but you have to take us down it. All right? I don't know the road system in Alaska. I don't know that the Parks Highway takes you from Fairbanks to Anchorage, but you do. So you have to guide me down that road. This is our point A, how space limitations cause people to be more inventive. Well, who are these people? These people are video game programmers. I can't even. What was the second point that I was that I was making? Oh, user interfaces, right? Well, the problem with consolidating space is that it leads to a very crowded interface for your video game. See, you've logically linked your first idea with your second idea, and even if it's not a direct correlation, even if it's not, a cause and effect thing, like one thing that leads to another. Let's say that your speech topic is that you're talking about your 3 favorite flavors of ice cream, and you like strawberry, chocolate, and vanilla, but you sort of like them all the same amount, all right? You're not, it's not like number 1 chocolate, number 2 vanilla, number 3 strawberry. You're like, I like each of these sort of about the same, You would say, now that we've talked about chocolate, I'm going to move on to a flavor that I like equally as much, vanilla. But it doesn't have to be a cause and effect. It doesn't have to be ranked. It can be a nominal, what's called a nominal organizational format. But you again just have to link. You have to tell me, like, now we're done with point A. Now we're done talking about chocolate, and we're moving on to point B, which is vanilla, strawberry, whatever it might be. All right. So that's transitioning in general. It's going to come up a bunch in the rubric. I'm not going to go over it again. Okay. I don't want to make this too boring for you guys. Competency 3 is your supporting material. Okay? Your supporting material is what is contained within the body of your speech. All right? How is your information relevant to your topic? If you're talking about video games and then you go off topic and you start talking about how, how computers control people's minds, well, that thing that you're talking about has no bearing. You haven't shown me why that subject is relevant to the main point that you were talking about, the overarching thesis, the general topic. How are any of these things related to each other? So you really want to make sure that you have a focused speech. Main points, clear and elaborated. Again, this is part of transitioning adequately. Some people, they'll go straight from their introduction into their body, and I have no idea how they got there. I'll be like, are we still in the introduction? Are we in the body portion? So you have to effectively tell us, like, now that we're done talking about this thing, I'm moving on to this thing. Or now that I've introduced the topic to you, now that I've previewed my points, let's talk about my first main point, X. After you're done with your first main points, now that we're done with point X, let's talk about how X affects Y. Here is the point Y, and here are my evidences, examples, all of that sort of thing. For each of your main points, you're going to have citations. The criteria that I have for your sources are going to be laid out in next week's Blackboard content. Very quickly, you need to have academic citations as well as other trustworthy citations. Academic citations are good because they go through a level of rigor where different academics look at them and they break it down, and if it doesn't pass muster, then that information doesn't get published. And then you have other reputable sources like news agencies. Whether or not you want to deliberate the authenticity of news agencies or anything like that, that kind of information is something that you can actually incorporate into your speech. You can say, according to NBC, whose information is reliable for reasons X, Y, and Z, or whose information is not reliable for reasons X, Y, and Z. However you feel about it, you can incorporate that part of it into your speech. But again, what you're trying to do is create logical links in the minds of your audience that prove the thing that you're trying to say. Okay? You want to lead people, if X, then Y. That's sort of what you want them to have when they're listening to your speech. And citations help you do that. They help you establish credibility when you're doing that. All right? And that's why we use them. Effective use of a visual aid. Our second speech is a visual aid speech. If you don't use a visual aid, or if you use it, like if you have a 5-minute presentation that only has one slide on it, unless that slide, really works for the thing that you're trying to convey, or is like the appropriate visual aid for the thing that you're trying to convey. If it doesn't make sense, then you're going to get points knocked off there. Moving on to organizational patterns, I was just talking about that. There's a nominal organizational pattern where you're talking about 3 things, and they're not ranked. They're not neat. None of them is like really, you don't need to know one before you know the other. Let's say you're talking about, let's say you're talking about American history, okay, and you want to talk about life on the East Coast, life on the West Coast, and life in the middle part of the country. If you don't need to know all of that information, if you don't need to know one before you know the other, you can talk about any which one in whatever order you want. As long as you tell us that that's what you're doing, that's totally fine. But we'll talk about the different kinds of organizational structures. I have them listed there. Chronological, obviously, that's if you're talking about serial killer X's descent into madness. First, when he was a child, his parents abused him. Then, he was rejected by everybody he knew, and therefore he became a serial killer. Whatever, then you're talking about it chronologically, all right? Then it does matter what order you're ranking things in, because we need to know one piece of information before, like if you just started your speech and you're like, so for all of those reasons, that's why this person became a serial killer, but you haven't told us what any of the reasons are, in that person's past, we have no clue what's happening in your speech, all right? I don't want to go too much into, you have topical, which is the same as nominal, what I was saying earlier. Spatial, which is if you're giving like a presentation and you're physically moving through the space. I had one student who, his topic, he talked about different kinds of rocks. I think he was a geology student, or he was just interested in rocks. And he physically had the 3 different kinds of rocks that he was going to talk about in the room, and he moved throughout them. That's what spatial means. Compare and contrast, cause and effect, we'll talk about all that stuff later on, okay? But organizational structure is, does your speech have a structure to it, or is it all loosey-goosey, okay? Transitions between points, transitions into conclusion, already talked about that, like I said. Summary of points and your conclusion, if you can think about it as the opposite of your preview of points, even though it gives the same information. Preview of points, you're about to talk about something, but you haven't spoken about it yet. And your summary of points, you've just finished talking about all these 3 main points, and now you're reminding us what they are. So if I was sitting there on my phone the entire time, not listening to what you were saying, but then I just looked up for your summary of points, I would know exactly what your speech is about. I wouldn't have all the details that you gave, but I would know what your speech is about, okay? Summary of points, definitive final statement. Again, you can think about that. It's also called a clincher. You can think about that as the opposite of a hook. Hook is meant to draw your audience in. Your clincher is when your audience leaves. You want to say something profound that's going to keep your topic lingering in their mind. If you're going to talk about a serial killer, you can end it with, was he always a psychopath, or was it how society treated him that made him the way that he is? That's a deep thought that you can leave your audience thinking with, and they're going to be like, holy crap, I always thought that serial killers were just psychopaths, but is it true that their environment can shape who they are? Maybe it's something they've never thought about before, It's something that that's a good final statement that sort of gets the ball rolling in your audience's mind, all right? And it can be a very, very powerful tool. Now, competency 5, appropriate language. Okay. I want you guys to listen to me very, very carefully. I know I spoke about this in the syllabus. In your supplemental information packet, which is linked in the syllabus, they have a lot of guidelines for biased language. The last time this was updated, I believe, was before the Me Too movement happened. There were a lot of social shifts that happened since the Me Too era, and even things before that, and even things after that, all right? If something that you're talking about is controversial, and I'm going to look at your outlines, but if something that you're talking about is controversial, okay, and I think it's controversial, and I think that something that you're saying is not the most modern or the most robust or the best way of thinking about something, then I'm going to gently nudge you in that direction. That is a very different thing than hate speech. You're free to talk about many, many, many things in my class. You start dropping racial slurs in your speeches. You start giving really extremist opinions about, why so-and-so group is inferior, or why, so-and-so should be whatever your feelings are about them. I've never run into that ever in my classes. If that is your personal opinion, you see, guys, it's a very, very dicey topic, okay? I if you use biased language in your speeches, then I dock you a point on your grades for that, because you didn't say something, because you said something that could have been construed as politically incorrect. That is a very fine line, but a very different thing than hate speech. If I construe something in your presentation to be hate speech, then that becomes a disciplinary issue that I will take up with my department as well as the university. I've never had to deal with that, and I hope that there are no students in my classes that have those kinds of beliefs that are going to make me have to deal or have that encounter with you. Okay, I really hope that there isn't. So moving on, formality. The reason that I need the speeches to be a little bit formal, so I just said in my previous lecture right before this class, I had one student who started off his speech. He was talking about slang language and cursing, and he started off his speech with "What's up, MFers?" And he said the actual words. That's fine. That can be in your speech, okay? But your speech can't be entirely composed of that without you making points effectively about why you're speaking in that exact way. Do you get what I'm saying? So if you're speaking in slang just for the sake of speaking in slang, you're going to get docked a lot of points, not just in these categories, but for preparedness and many other, and for writing and all that sort of thing. Okay. However, if you are making good, effective points using slang, because that is the point of what your speech is about, that's fine, all right? Otherwise, in all other circumstances, your speech has to be worded in a formal way. And that's so that it's intelligible, so that it's comprehensible, so that I know and that your audience knows what you're talking about, okay? For the purposes of this class, you don't really have an audience unless you're giving your speech in front of people, because I'm the only person who's going to be seeing your speeches, whereas in a classroom environment, other people would be seeing the class would be seeing your speech. But even for me to understand, I want it to be in formal language, okay? Now, this ties into the next point. The next criteria does not draw attention to speaker or occasion. In your speeches, you're allowed to use personal pronouns. I don't care if you say I, me, my, we, our. It doesn't make a difference to me, okay? I don't consider that as being informal. However, I've had students do things like they'll be talking and then they'll stop themselves in the middle of their speeches and just be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous right now." Never ever do that, okay? Similarly, don't use verbal fillers. In regular speech, in regular day-to-day speech, it's normal to say like, or it's normal to lose track of your train of thought. A speech is not everyday conversation. It's a prepared thing. So for you to be using verbal fillers is a bad sign. It's a sign of lack of preparedness. So don't use verbal fillers, and that's why it's a good thing to practice your speeches and prepare them over and over again, okay? Where are we at? Competency 6, vocal presentation. I said this in the previous class, and I'm going to say this to you guys as well. Vocal presentation is one of those things where people who are nervous about giving speeches, this is where a lot of their nervousness comes from, okay? Or this is where a lot of their nervousness shows itself, rather. And it's one of those things that I think it's probably one of the easier ways that you can really bolster the quality of your speech with doing really not a lot of work. Okay, all it takes is practicing a few times, and that's what this class is designed to do. Is that it's designed to get you presenting as much as possible, so that you're more comfortable doing those sorts of things. So first of all, no reading. Okay, a speech is not you holding a piece of paper in front of your face and just reading it like a list. I know that you can read. That's not what a speech is. A speech, like I keep saying, is essentially a performance, an informative performance. Okay. So there's no reading. Reading, once again, gets you docked points for that criteria. It also gets you docked points for preparedness, for practice, for a whole host of things. Okay? So don't make me have to deal with that. Rate, this is a big one. Rate, let's say I'm speaking really quickly and I'm talking about a topic that you guys don't really know about, and I'm really blasting through it and not really giving a lot of good examples. That's bad. Obviously. Okay? Similarly, if I'm speaking really slowly, I'm like just trailing off a lot when I speak. You see how frustrated it is? Especially because you know the point that I'm trying to get to, but I keep making that point, and so you've already understood it in your mind, but I keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it in this infuriatingly slow rate. You don't want to do that to your audience. It's going to drive them nuts. The other thing is that if you're speaking very quickly or if you're speaking very slowly, you might go over or under your time requirements. You don't want to do that. You want to stay, and you're going to hear me use this expression a lot, you're going to want to stay in the Goldilocks zone. So for expressiveness and changes in pitch, you don't want to be very monotone. Similarly to speaking slowly, if I were speaking like this the entire time, even if I were speaking at a comprehensible and good rate that was in the Goldilocks zone, if I am speaking like this the entire time, then that is a different kind of mind-numbing. All right? You see how I'm emphatic and expressive. I gesticulate a lot when I speak. That's sort of how you want to be. And finally, intensity and volume. Okay, your speeches are recorded. Again, in the class, it's a different thing. In the class, your speech has to be loud enough for the person in the back of the room to be able to hear you without you being mic'd up. Okay? If you're recording yourself, like you will be for this class, and you listen to your recording, first of all, please listen to your recording before you submit it to me. But then you listen to your recording and you can't hear yourself, re-record it, okay? Volume should not be an issue that arrives to me when you're recording your own speeches, okay? Once again, it's one of those things, I don't think I've ever had to deal with it. It's a silly thing to make me have to deal with. Pronunciation. Okay, let's talk about grammar for a little bit here. All right. If I was to say that this sentence I just said was incorrect because it was not in the subjunctive mood, it's not something that I'm going to bust you on. If you were to say that it was incorrect, that would be fine. You get what I'm doing there? So the difference between if I was and if I were to say, I'm not going to bust you guys on things like that. Subject-object differentiation, these are all things that you should know. Speaking in the subjunctive mood, these are all things that you should know. If you don't know them, I'm not gonna bust you for them. However, if you're making simple grammatical mistakes, if you say February instead of February, I will dock you points for that. If you say library instead of library, I will dock you points for that. If you I can't even think of a lot of the examples that I can think of are also like nobody would ever say I is or anything like that. So there's no, grammar is one of those things that I generally never have to dock people points for. But if it becomes an issue or if it is an issue, I should be able to tell from your outline. Otherwise, if it's in your speech, it might be unfortunate. I'll dock you the point for it, but I will let you know, what the mistake you made was, and you won't repeat that mistake later on. All right? Articulation, this is sort of the same as rate. You want to make sure that people are understanding the words that you're saying, especially if, so I didn't go over jargon. If you're a marine biologist or studying genetics or studying engineering or even studying English and talking about things like the subjunctive mood and subject-object differentiation, nominative versus accusative, any of that sort of thing. If you were using these terms and not defining what they are, I'm not going to understand it. Your audience isn't going to understand it. You want to make yourself, you don't want to spend your entire speech defining things for people. You want to be succinct and you want to use concepts that are easy for people to understand. But if you do use complicated concepts or words, you want to define them, okay? And articulation is a big part of people being able to even understand what the word is that you're saying. And if you notice, I'm pretty decent at articulation. You have to be if you want to be a good teacher, which I am. All right. And finally, the delivery. You maintain a consistent delivery. If you're not umming and awing, and this also feeds into the next point there, no vocalic fillers. But if you're stopping and starting your speech, again, that can be very infuriating for your listener. And if you're using a lot of vocalic fillers, you're going to get dog points for lack of preparation. You didn't practice your speech. And you'll also get dog points for delivery because your delivery is very stop and go. Or if you're, stopping there to remember, stopping every couple of seconds to remember your speech because you tried to memorize the entire thing, you're going to get dog points for all that stuff. All right? Pretty self-explanatory. And by the way, guys, the chat is working now if you need to ask a question. So just let me know and I'll answer it for you there. Nobody asked anything? Yeah, okay. All right, the final competency here is nonverbal support, eye contact. Unfortunately, eye contact is one of those things that we don't get a chance to work on in an online environment. If you do have an audience, then you can practice making eye contact with them. Otherwise, when you're giving your speeches, I think you can tell that my whole physical being is engaged in the thing that I'm doing. I'm not sort of like looking up or looking off, trying to remember what it is that I'm saying. I'm not like burning a hole through the camera. You can tell that my body, my presence is engaged in the thing that I'm doing. So that's how you should be. If you can do that, especially in an online, like through a camera environment, that's a really good thing. I really wish that I wish there was an effective way to work on eye contact. There isn't really a great way to do it online, okay? Same thing with gestures and facial expression. You want to use them in a way that's effective. You don't want to be like all over the place and just be like, yeah, so that's crazy, holy crap. Can you guys believe this stuff? You don't want to be doing, it's not like a comedy routine from 1951, you want to be warm and inviting, and you want your audience to know that you care about the thing that you were saying. I was just before we were teaching this class, I was watching Joe Biden's inauguration, and he was, towards the end of his speech, I thought he started really caring about the thing that he was talking about, but he was using a lot of rhetorical language. There's actually a textbook that there's an academics book actually that I read about this a while ago. I can't remember what it is. I was using it when I was writing my thesis, but this person was sort of denigrating the way that people use the word rhetoric to mean this like empty speech, but I couldn't help feeling that a lot of the rhetorical language that Joe Biden was using at the beginning of his speech, I was like, this guy is very clearly reading a speech that somebody either wrote for him, or he's using these kind of condescending platitudes, okay, which I don't really like it. When people are like, I do this for my country, for hope, for the future. If you're saying those words, but I'm not believing you when you're saying them, it's not a good sign. One of the things that I pride myself on as a speaker is I like to feel like I'm really engaging with my audience. I do this game when I'm teaching a class. When I'm teaching a class physically, like in the classroom. It's a mnemonic activity where I start off saying, my name is Ramsey and I like Radiohead. The next person, let's say it's whatever. Let's say her name is Mona, all right? She would say, his name is Ramsey, he likes Radiohead, my name is Mona, and I like math, all right? The person after her is Charlie. Charlie would say, his name is Ramsey, he likes Radiohead, her name is Mona, she likes math, my name is Charlie, and I like chuckling, right? And with that game, I get to learn everybody's, I make it a point, after the entire class goes around, I then will do the entire class just to really cement just to really get to know everybody's name. That's sort of how you want to be with your body language. It's how you want to be with your entire speech. You want to make your audience feel like you're engaged with them, especially if you have a large group. You want to make people feel like you're engaged with all of them. You don't want to be saying empty platitudes, and you want to believe the thing that you're saying. By the way, I'm not saying that Joe Biden doesn't believe or didn't believe the things that he was saying, but he didn't convey it in a way that I was like, where I felt like, oh, this guy has there's like a fire behind the things that this guy's saying. So you never want people to have, you never want people to get that impression of you, okay? That oh, this guy doesn't really buy what he's selling. And your body language is a good way of doing that. Last couple of competencies there. Sorry, I know I went on a long tangent there. Last couple of competencies there. So pretty much putting weight into your words. Yeah. You always want to. And by the way, Justin and everybody who's watching, this isn't something that you just want to do with speeches. In general, when you're speaking, you want people to feel like you're engaged. There's this. If you've ever watched Fight Club, there's a scene. The protagonist, he keeps going to all these different support groups for diseases he doesn't have, and he meets somebody else who's doing the same thing, and she says what he's thinking, you know, when they meet each other. She was like, you know, I know you come here because people really listen to you rather than at these sorts of things, rather than just waiting for their turn to speak. You don't want people to feel like when you speak, you're just waiting for them to finish, you know, saying the thing that's coming out of their head so you can say the thing that's coming out of your head. You want people to feel like you really care about what they're saying. That's an important thing. And it's important. It's an important part of developing empathy as a human being, you know? So putting weight into your words is a good way to say it. All right. And we'll talk about this. This will be a subject that I'll go on a lot of tangents on throughout the rest of the semester. So I'll curtail it for now. Note cards, use of note cards, that's totally fine. It's totally fine if you're holding note cards in your hands. It's not fine if you're like reading complete sentences off your note cards, or if you're holding your note cards in front of your face. Again, don't make me have to deal with that. And finally, the last thing on there, appearance. Most of you are probably at home. You have access to a wardrobe that has at least one shirt with a collar on it. Please wear it, okay? Don't wear your PJs. I had one student one semester who, it was the dead of winter, he put on his boots, walked to my class, took off his boots, and then put on his fuzzy slippers. And I had to commend him for the earnestness, for the commitment to comfort. But for the purposes of your speeches, don't wear PJs. Don't wear your cool band shirt, whatever it might be. Just put on something with a collar. Don't make it have anything stupid written across the front. You know, I don't care if it's a polo or if it's a button-down shirt, whatever it might be. If you're military, you want to wear your uniform. I know women have. I don't know a lot about what's considered formal wear for women, but if it looks too casual, wear something else. All right. If you're wearing PJs or something like that, I'm gonna immediately dock you points for appearance. There's no reason for you to be in PJs. All right, it's such an easy point to get on your rubric. All right, okay, folks. I'm so tired of talking. That's it for the rubric. I just have a couple of things. I have a couple of other things that I want to get into. Last time I tried switching a thing here, my whole system went kaputski. So let's do this. Let me open the thing that I want to open up. And then we'll just flip into desktop view. There we go. Okay, great. Okay, that's fantastic. Okay. Now for your presentations, for the way that things are graded, so you have an informative speech, a visual aid speech, your fishbowl, and your symposium. Those are the main presentations that you're giving. The first two are worth 100. Fishbowl is worth 150. Symposium is worth 200 points. Okay? So they're all graded on this 40-point rubric. The 8 competencies, each of them is worth 5 points. So that's 40 points total. Okay? 8 points out of 40 is a 60% on a 100-point presentation. 90 points on your 150-point presentation, and 120 points on your 200-point presentation, but all of those equal a D-, all right, a passing grade, all right? And if you'll see, the rubric, the grade conversion doesn't even go lower than that, because I can't give you anything lower than that. If you give me your name, just a video file with your name and your speech topic, the minimum that I can give you is an 8 out of 40, which is a passing grade, a D-, all right? 10 out of 40, you start to get into a D. 16 out of 40, you get into C-. And by the way, the grade it's graded on a logarithmic scale, if you'll notice. So 8 out of 40 and 20 out of 40 is the difference of one letter grade, right? D- to a C, all right? Whereas 20 out of 40 to 34 out of 40, a 14-point difference, is a C to an A, all right? So they're graded. So it's like, so the same or a similar number of points is worth about 1.5 letter grades of difference from the D minus to the C, whereas from the C to the A is 2 whole points or 2 whole letter grades. All right. So it's graded. So it's not like, it's not really going to be similar to any other grading scale that you've seen before. Because it's its own unique thing, and it's sort of made in a way that like compresses everybody towards the middle. It's also very forgiving. So if you get a 34 out of 40 on your, so you're allowed to screw up 6 points on your presentation and still get an A, which I think is very lenient and very which is like a nice thing for you guys. All right. But what I don't want is if you get a 20 out of 40, I had a student message me and be like, a couple of semesters ago, a student messaged me and was like, I think 20 out of 40, I think a 50% is really harsh for the presentation that I gave. And I was like 50%? I didn't give anybody like if you're getting 50%, then you're just getting a 0. So I looked and they had gotten a 20 out of 40, which is a 75, but they hadn't looked at the grade conversion. So the only things that are on this, the only things that you're graded on a scale for, on a variable scale for, are your presentations. So there are 4 grades out of everything that you're going to do this semester that are graded using a rubric. Your activities, like your monologue activity that's due this week, if you meet the criteria for it, you get a passing grade. You get the full 30 points. So you get 30 out of 30 for that activity. Okay? If you don't hand it in, you get a 0. I don't give partial points for activities. So the only thing that you need to be looking up grade conversions for are your informative speech, your visual aid speech, your fishbowl, and your symposium. Okay? Everything else, if you do it, you get 100%. If you don't do it, you get 0. That's just how it works in my class. All right? Same thing for discussion, same thing for everything else. Okay? And so that is the last thing that I want to talk about, is this monologue activity that is due that's due this week. This activity really should be more called a presentation or like a delivery activity rather than a monologue activity, because you're not required to only do a monologue. You can do a dialogue, or you can do a poem, you can do whatever you want, but it's intended to sort of get you in the mood, in the space of the thing that you're presenting. So what you need to do for this activity is you pick out any piece of media or literature. It can be a scene from a TV show or movie, or a play, an excerpt from a book, a poem, song lyrics. If it's not on there, you can do whatever you want. I had a student who did an ogre is like an onion scene from Shrek, where he came in and he was Shrek, and he had all of Eddie Murphy as Donkey's lines on his phone. And he came in with a Bluetooth speaker, and so he would say his line, and then he would play the next line that Eddie Murphy would respond with in the movie, and then he would respond, and then he'd play the Eddie Murphy line from his phone. It was very, very cool, okay? So you can do anything like that. That's totally fine. You can get somebody in your household to help you out if you want to do a dialogue. I had these 2 students come in and do a dialogue. They were in the same class, and they were friends. They were friends outside of class, so they came in and they did a dialogue from The Princess Bride. That's totally fine, and you'll absolutely get points for doing stuff like that. I don't know if we have people, or actually even if people want to post in the discussion forums and like figure out a way to like record something together, that'd be awesome. That'd be you going above and beyond what you need to do. But the idea is to like put you in place of the thing that you're doing. So I don't care if you do it the exact way that the actor or the artist that you're taking this scene from does it. So like if you're doing Marlon Brando's monologue from Apocalypse Now, then what's it called? You can do it the way that he does it exactly. That's totally fine. What I'm trying to do is for people who are not comfortable with performance, to break them out of their comfort zone and to like put them into the space where they're comfortable conveying the mood of a piece of literature, to be able to like cognitively link that with their speeches so that they can put themselves in the mood of the speech that they're trying to convey. I said earlier that I don't want you burning a hole through the camera, like looking into your audience's eyes. But if you're giving a speech about, about the lives that child soldiers in Africa have to go through, and you want your audience to feel the weight of what you're saying, you can definitely look them in the eye and say it so that they feel the weight, the gravity of what you're saying. That's totally fine, and that's what this activity is intended to do. All right. So you want to select one of these pieces. It should give you anywhere between 1 to 3 minutes of material. You can give me a longer, it's not like your speech. If you give me something shorter, you will get, like I said earlier, you'll get 0 points. If you give me something that is longer than 3 minutes, I'm not actually going to dock you points for this specific activity, but I'm going to stop watching at the 3 minute mark because I have over 100 of these that I need to watch and give points for, all right? And then you're going to record your performance and upload it to our shared Google Drive folder. Somebody was asking me in the other class whether or not anybody else is going to see any content that's in our shared Google Drive folder. Nobody but you and me and whoever you share the Google Drive folder with will see the content that's in there. I will never share that Google Drive folder with anybody, all right? The only way that I am allowed to show your content to other unaffiliated people is the way that I do it is I would email you. I'd be like, let's say Justin, listen, Justin, the monologue activity that you did was really, really, really great. I would love to be able to use it in the future so that my students can get an exemplar idea of how to do this activity. You message me back, you're like, I'm not really comfortable doing that. Conversation stops there. If you email me back and you're like, yeah, that's totally fine. I'm totally up for that. Then I would send you a waiver that comes from the university to release. It's like a FERPA release for that specific activity, for that specific assignment. And I would be able to share that with Justin's consent. Otherwise, nobody will ever see this monologue activity besides me and you, unless you, the owner of the folder, share it with somebody else. Because I never will do that, all right? I can get into a lot of trouble. And not just me, your other teachers can't share anything with your face or your voice, anything recognizable, or with your name on it with other people, all right? Without getting into trouble. You should know that for your future classes, all right? So just to wind up the activity requirements, once you've picked out a piece, you'll have to really deliver it in the emotional intent of that scene. You can read this off of paper. That's totally fine. It's not like a speech. It doesn't have to be memorized. If you want to memorize it, then that's great. Go ahead. Some tips. It's probably better if you pick up monologue. If you want to go above and beyond and do a dialogue or something like that, like I said, I won't stop you. For the time limit, each of you, if you're doing a piece that is 2 people in the class, then each of you has to give me a minute's worth of content. So I'll need at least a 2-minute long video file. And then I would practice delivering it a couple of times, all right? You never want to, even with your speeches, practice definitely, make close to perfect. You never want to give something, raw right off the bat. You're always going to be better off practicing it a couple of times, because even if it's something that you've written, even if it's your own speech, you're never going to be truly familiar with it until you practice. You're never going to be truly familiar with the ins and outs. Does this sentence I wrote make sense when I say it out loud? Is it a run-on sentence? Is it really a clogged idea? You're never going to get a sense of that until you practice it. So even for this monologue activity, I would really encourage that you practice it. And finally, if you've got any questions, shoot me an email. It's the fastest way to get me to respond to you. Please remember, folks, I do have over 100 students. I'm going to try to get back to you within 2 working days. If it takes me a little bit longer than that, just send me an email sort of nudging me. I apologize, but I've got a lot of things that I have a lot of students and a lot of material that I've got to get through now that people have started submitting assignments. So I appreciate you cutting me a little bit of slack with regards to that. That being said, that is it for today's class. I know today was on a Wednesday. Next week's lecture will be at 11:45 on a Monday. It was Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday this week. I'm sorry I didn't realize that last week. I will try. I think I think we shouldn't have any days off until spring break, but I'll revisit everything just in case, and so I can let you know beforehand. But next week's lecture will be on Monday at 11:45. All right, folks. If nobody, I'm going to wait about 30 seconds. I'm going to wait a full minute, just see if anybody has got any questions. Let's see. Okay, yeah. I'm going to just give you guys a chance to ask a question. If nobody's got any questions within the next minute, I'm going to end the stream here, and you can just email me if you've got any questions. All right? Just going to stare awkwardly at the camera here. Whoa. Silence. All right. Okay, it doesn't look like anybody's asking any questions, and I think even after I end the stream, you can still ask questions. But all right, folks, I'm just gonna end it right here. It doesn't look like anybody's asking any questions. Video will be available shortly after the stream ends if you want to watch it again. I think the first section's lecture is already available. It says pretty much the same thing. If you've got any questions, shoot me an email, and I will see you next Monday at 11:45. Peace out.